The sky before dawn. The wind clung to the mountain like a living thing, slipping over ridges, curling into hidden gullies, then breaking loose in sudden bursts along the cliff faces. Far above the tree line, where only lichens and a few stubborn alpine flowers clung to the rock, a lone eagle perched on a granite outcrop. Its talons gripped the stone as if it had grown from it, steady against the push and pull of the air. This eagle was unlike most of its kind. Its wings bore the scars of years spent testing the limits of the sky, small gaps in feathers where old battles had been fought, faint streaks where the sun had burned its plumage pale. Yet, despite the weathered look, its eyes were bright and restless. It had flown farther than most would dare, chasing the high thermals that curled above valleys, hunting in the thin, cold air where prey was scarce and competition was fierce. But still, something in its chest pulled it higher. Below, the slopes fell away sharply, revealing a mosaic of valleys stitched together by silver rivers. From this vantage point, the eagle could see the lowland forests, their canopy stirred by distant winds. Other eagles, ravens, and smaller raptors worked those lower skies, each bound to the rhythms of the land, the rising of warm air in the morning, the cooling descent at dusk. But the upper cloud eagle had long since grown impatient with these predictable circuits. When the wind shifted, bringing a faint scent of ice from the glacier beyond the ridge, the eagle raised its wings. The feathers caught the air with practiced precision, adjusting in tiny increments that no eye could see. It stepped off the rock without a sound, letting gravity take it first, then the wind take it further. For a few heartbeats, it dropped, wings tucked, before opening them wide and feeling the surge of lift carry it away from the cliff. The climb began immediately. This was no idle glide. The eagle angled its wings to bite into an upward current, gaining height with every slow, powerful stroke. The air thinned quickly. Muscles pulled against the drag. Each beat was deliberate, costly. The eagle's lungs worked harder now, drawing in what little oxygen the altitude allowed. In the distance, a raven attempted to follow but soon banked away, unable to match the pace in such rarefied air. By midday, the eagle was already beyond the peaks where goats picked their way across narrow ledges. Below, the snowfields gleamed under the sun, fractured by shadows of overhanging cliffs. Thin strands of cloud drifted level with its flight, their edges torn and curling. The air here was colder, sharper, the kind that stripped heat from the body. But the eagle's plumage was layered for this, each feather locked with the next, sealing warmth inside. From here, the world below seemed almost irrelevant. The patterns that governed life there, the hunt, the territorial disputes, the endless cycles of food and rest, were distant concerns. The eagle's attention was fixed upward, toward the unseen layers of wind it had yet to reach. It had been close before, skimming the underside of the highest clouds, but never above them. Something in its instinct whispered that there was a place where the air grew still again, where light was clearer and the horizon stretched unbroken. The eagle banked into a turn, riding a stronger thermal rising from a dark cliff face warmed by hours of sunlight. Its body tilted with the current, tail feathers acting as a rudder. Here, precision meant survival. One misjudged angle and the lift would be lost, forcing a long descent before another current could be found. It circled once, twice, feeling the current carry it another 100 meters above the ridge. The air here had a different weight. It pressed less against the body, almost like swimming in a lighter sea. The eagle's eyes narrowed against the glare, scanning ahead. Far off, the upper clouds loomed, thick, slow-moving formations, their undersides dark with moisture, their crowns glowing white under the sun. That was where it wanted to be. And it would get there. The sun leaned westward, but its heat still poured into the dark stone of the mountain walls. That heat was the key. It rose invisibly from the cliffs, carrying pockets of air that swelled upward in silent, twisting columns. The eagle knew them not by sight but by feel, a faint trembling in the air, a sudden lightness in the wings. It had found such a column now. With wings half folded, it turned sharply, diving just enough to gain speed, then spread them wide to let the current catch. The lift was instant. It didn't rise like a wave, it carried the eagle in a smooth, steady pull, as though the mountain itself were reaching up. The climb was not constant. Warm air spiraled in uneven shapes, and the eagle adjusted constantly, banking left when the lift leaned that way, tilting right when it swayed. Too far off center and the current would spit it out, forcing a return to the base to try again. Years of flight had trained the bird to read these invisible streams as easily as a hunter reads tracks in snow. Higher and higher, the land began to flatten beneath. Valleys turned into shallow folds, forests into patches of color. A hawk glided far below, no more than a flicker against the patchwork of green and brown. The air cooled. Each beat of the wings felt heavier now, not from the wind but from the body's need to work harder. The eagle's chest rose and fell in a quickened rhythm, drawing in air that seemed thinner with every meter gained. Its heart pumped harder, muscles burning slightly from the effort. But it did not falter. This was the edge of its known range, the altitude where most birds leveled off. It was here that the challenges began. The thin air meant weaker lift. The eagle could no longer rely on broad, lazy circles. It had to keep a sharper angle, cutting tightly through the air to stay inside the core of the rising column. Every movement had to be exact, a single sloppy turn would waste precious height. A gust struck from the side, cold as it slid off the snowfield to the north. The eagle tucked its left wing slightly, countering the push, and continued upward. It glanced briefly toward the glacier, a jagged sheet of white fractured by deep blue crevasses. Even from here, the wind carried the glacier's smell, dry, mineral, and ancient. Now the clouds grew closer, their slow drift almost imperceptible from below. The undersides were dark gray, heavy with moisture. Sunlight bled around their edges, turning them into luminous giants suspended in the sky. The eagle's eyes tracked a narrow gap, a break in the formations where clear sky glimmered beyond. But the climb would be harder from here. The column of warm air thinned as it neared the base of the cloud, broken by the cooler masses above. The eagle's wings flexed and adjusted constantly, every movement deliberate. A sudden downdraft slammed downward, the cold bite of air tumbling from the belly of the cloud. The eagle dipped sharply, losing height in seconds. It did not panic. It folded its wings halfway, dropped into the draft's flow, and banked hard to one side, slipping out of its grip. Then, with a quick, strong beat of its wings, it cut across the wind to find another rising pocket. It was a game of persistence now, one updraft at a time. Finally, the air shifted again. Warmer, lighter. The eagle widened its circles, catching the broad lift that curved around the edge of the cloud. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the land below faded into haze. The peaks it had left behind were now level with its flight, their snowcaps glowing under the sun. Up here, there was no sound except the wind over feathers. The air was so thin it no longer roared in the ears, it whispered. The eagle was nearly at the height it had never surpassed. One more push, and the world above the clouds would be within reach. At this altitude, the sky was rarely empty. The vast blue might seem endless from the ground, but above the ridges, every flyer claimed a piece of air. The first shape appeared as a dark silhouette against the clouds, wings long and steady. A golden eagle, broad-shouldered, with flight feathers spread like fingers. It was not circling, it was cutting a straight path across the ridge currents, likely heading to hunt along the snowfields. But the moment its eyes caught the climbing shape of the upper cloud eagle, its path bent slightly. Eagles were not in the habit of sharing high air. The golden closed the distance in slow, deliberate strokes, its massive wings riding the same thermals. It approached from above, the position of dominance, and let its shadow sweep across the upper cloud eagle's back. The message was simple: this height is mine. But the upper cloud eagle did not flatten or turn away. It shifted slightly, keeping its own lift, adjusting just enough to keep climbing without provoking a chase. Confrontation meant wasted energy, and every wing beat counted at this altitude. The golden drifted closer, talons half unfurled. For a moment, the air was tight with the tension of two hunters measuring each other. Then, perhaps deciding that this intruder was not after its territory below, the golden banked sharply, vanishing into the layered mist of the lower clouds. The climb continued. Far ahead, a smaller, sharper shape sliced across the sky, a peregrine falcon. At this height, falcons were rare. They preferred lower hunts, where the air was thick enough for blistering dives. But some patrolled high ridges, scanning for migrating birds. The falcon darted in erratic lines, each turn cutting invisible arcs into the sky. When it noticed the upper cloud eagle, it did not challenge directly. Instead, it rose on quick wing beats and began circling at a parallel altitude, keeping distance but watching. Peregrines had no interest in eagles' prey, but their speed meant they could harass, force turns, or even drive another bird from a thermal just for the advantage. The upper cloud eagle ignored it at first, keeping its climb steady. But the falcon was restless. It darted closer, slicing through the air in a short, shallow dive that passed in front of the eagle's path. A warning. The eagle rolled one wing slightly, slipping under the falcon's path without breaking rhythm. The message was returned: I am not leaving. After a few more testing passes, the falcon lost interest, banking away toward the far ridge where smaller birds flickered in the sun. By now, the ascent had cost much of the eagle's stored strength. The air was thin enough that every correction required more from the muscles. Its wings ached, but the rhythm remained slow, deliberate, efficient. The key was not speed but persistence. Higher still, the blue deepened in color. The upper clouds were now close enough to show texture, rolling shapes like slow waves, their tops blinding white under the sun. The eagle could see where light streamed through gaps, shafts of gold cutting into the gray beneath. It was nearly there. Only the last and hardest layer of air lay between it and the space above the clouds. And this final stretch was one no rival would follow. The wind was cleaner here, stripped of dust and the scents of the valleys. It carried only the cold weight of the high peaks and the faint sharpness of ice. The eagle's shadow had grown small on the mountains below, its outline breaking and reforming over the jagged ridges as it climbed. Ahead lay the glacier, a vast, frozen river spilling down from the highest crown of the range. Even from the eagle's altitude, its scale was daunting. The ice was not smooth, it was fractured into ridges and chasms, each glowing in a different shade of blue. Some crevasses were so deep that their bottoms faded into black. Crossing a glacier was not like crossing forest or rock. The surface reflected sunlight upward, warming no air for lift. Here, thermals were scarce and unpredictable. Cold air poured down from the ice in steady sheets, dragging at the eagle's wings, trying to force it lower. The bird angled its body, searching for a side current, a slip of warmer air rising from the rocky walls that flanked the glacier. None came. It was committed now to cross. It would need to work, muscle against air, conserving enough strength for the climb beyond. Each wing beat was heavier than the last. The thin air made the work almost like lifting through water, every movement slowed by resistance. The eagle's breathing deepened, chest muscles contracting in rhythm with the strokes. Midway across, the downdrafts intensified. Cold air fell like invisible waterfalls, curling and swirling in the channels between ice ridges. The eagle tilted its tail, slipping sideways into a slightly calmer pocket, then angled upward sharply to catch what little lift remained. Far below, a snow hare moved across the glacier's edge, too far to hunt, but a reminder of the world the eagle had left behind. Hunting here was impossible. This was a crossing, not a feeding ground. The upper clouds loomed closer now, towering like cliffs of vapor. Their lower edges boiled slowly in the sunlight, trailing wisps that shredded in the wind. Between two of these massive forms was a gap narrow, but enough to see the deep blue of the sky beyond. The eagle adjusted its path toward it, knowing that the gap was more than an opening. It was a window into the air above, where the great currents curved and flattened into stillness. Near the edge of the glacier, a final burst of rising air found the eagle. It was weak but steady, the kind that could carry it just enough to reach the cloud's base. The bird seized it, angling into tight, efficient circles. The glacier fell away beneath, replaced by an ocean of cloud. The eagle's wingtips brushed cold vapor, scattering droplets into the air. The temperature dropped further, the air damp and heavy against its feathers. For a few moments, vision was reduced to white mist and the muffled rush of wind. Then, slowly, the light changed. The mist began to thin. The whiteness softened, and a warm glow filtered through. One more push, wings straining, body lifting, and the eagle broke free of the cloud's top. The world opened in a way the eagle had never seen before. The clouds, which from below had seemed like towering walls, were now an unbroken plain, stretching to every horizon. They were not flat, they rolled and swelled like the surface of a slow ocean, their crests glowing under the sun, their valleys falling away into soft shadow. The eagle was no longer beneath the sky, it was in it, adrift on a sea of white. Above, the blue was deeper than any river or lake, a shade that only existed here, where the air was thin enough to let the darkness of space press closer. The sunlight was pure, unfiltered, so bright that even the eagle's eyes, built for the glare of snowfields, narrowed against it. There was no sound except the quiet hiss of wind slipping past feathers. It was not the roar of low-altitude flight, where air clings thick to the body. Here, the air was light, almost insubstantial, so that each stroke of the wing moved through it without resistance. The eagle's body felt both powerful and weightless, like a swimmer drifting in a current. It leveled its flight, letting the slow, steady motion of the air carry it forward. The view was endless, no peaks breaking the horizon, no ridges cutting across the land. Only the vast white plain below and the dome of sky above. Here, there was no prey to chase, no rival to defend against. The eagle's talons hung loosely, relaxed. It was not here to hunt. This was a place of observation, a vantage point few creatures would ever see. It banked slightly, the shadow of its wings sliding over the clouds below. The shadow was sharp, a perfect silhouette against the glowing white. It followed for a time, as if the bird were flying in formation with itself. Occasionally, the surface of the clouds would break, revealing fragments of the world beneath, the flash of a river catching sunlight, the jagged outline of a peak, the green blur of forest far below. But these glimpses were brief, swallowed again by the moving vapor. The eagle tested the air here, tilting into a shallow climb. Even at this height, there were subtle currents, warm flows rising through gaps in the cloud, cooler air sliding down from higher layers. They were weaker, slower, but they carried the bird with a grace unlike the violent lifts of the mountains. Time seemed to stretch. The sun's angle shifted slowly, painting the clouds in warmer light. Shadows deepened in their folds, and the white surface turned to gold, then to a faint rose. It was a dangerous place to linger. Fatigue came silently at this altitude, hidden beneath the lightness of the air. But the eagle stayed a moment longer, tracing one final wide arc across the cloud sea, letting its eyes take in the farthest edge of the horizon. Only when the first cooling breath of evening touched the air did it turn toward the descent. The upper cloud had been reached. And now, it would carry the memory of this view in every flight to come. The eagle tilted one wing downward, letting the light air slip from beneath it. There was no rush in the descent, gravity would do the work, and the currents would guide the rest. It left the upper world in long, unbroken glides, its body steady, wings spread wide to drink in every possible meter of lift before giving it away to the slow fall. The cloud plain beneath began to rise toward it as the sun dipped lower. Shadows pooled in the folds of the vapor, turning the glowing white into a vast landscape of silver and charcoal. A narrow break in the clouds opened, showing the glacier below, a reminder of the crossing it had made only hours ago. The air spilling from the gap was cold and damp, pushing upward in a slow drift. The eagle rode it without effort, allowing it to extend the glide even further. The lower it went, the heavier the air felt. The soft hiss of thin wind gave way to the fuller sound of denser currents pressing against feathers. Muscles that had worked tirelessly in the climb now rested in rhythm, adjusting only to steer. The descent was a gift. The bird could travel for kilometers without a single beat of the wing. The glacier's edge passed beneath, giving way to the hard ridges of rock and snow. Here, the familiar thermals of the mountains returned, rising from sun-warmed stone, swirling around cliff faces. The eagle's shadow stretched long across them, bending with the slopes. Far below, the forest was already in shade, its canopy shifting in the evening wind. Flocks of smaller birds darted between treetops, their calls faint in the distance. A raven's voice echoed off the cliffs, a sharp, brief note that rose and vanished in the open air. The eagle angled toward the granite outcrop where the day had begun. Its talons flexed once, anticipating the rock's solidity. When it landed, it folded its wings slowly, each feather sliding back into place. The light was fading now, the last orange of the sun clinging to the highest ridges. The sky above was clear, the upper clouds already far behind. The eagle stood still, head turning slightly as it scanned the valley below and the peaks above. It had reached the upper cloud, and it had returned. The world was unchanged, the mountains, the rivers, the winds, but something within the bird had shifted. The climb was no longer a question. The path was known, the way open. When the next right wind came, it would rise again.